Okay, so now we're going in the Midrash to the post-biblical period. It's in the first volume, page 126. There are a couple of stories in the Midrash about Alexander the Great. The rabbis were fascinated with Alexander the Great, but not only them. In the whole Middle East, there was a very prolific literature about Alexander the Great, and they collected the stories and they perpetuated them. But the rabbis told the stories with two main concepts in mind. Two things that they focused on. One is his tolerant approach to the Jews, and they said that this is because he met when he was arriving in Eretz Israel. He met with Shimon HaTzadik, and he said that the image of Shimon HaTzadik follows him when he goes to war, and that's why he wins. And the other is their attempt to dissuade people from being impressed by his greatness, meaning that, especially when you think about the Jews under the Greeks and then under the Romans, and they look at the magnitude of those empires, the opulence and what they have, and the rabbis are afraid that we don't want people to be carried away after materialism in such a way. So they felt that it's opposed to Judaism on many levels. So these are the kind of stories that they told. So some of these stories appear in the Talmud, some of them in later Midrashim, and they say this. At one time, Alexander the Great told his advisors, I want to go to Africa. So this is the kind of like geography or knowledge of the old world of antiquity. They said you can't go to Africa because between Asia and Africa there are the dark mountains that you can go through. And he says, I'm not asking you whether to go or not to go, just how to go. So they said, Tol hamurim luvim shemalechim ba'afela. Take the Libyan donkeys. They were known as very sturdy animals of burden. And tie them with a spool of ropes, and tie one end here to your kingdom in Greece or Macedonia, and walk, and then you know how to walk back. So this obviously is an exaggeration, right? Because to have the thinnest thread that you'll take on a donkey cannot carry you for thousands of miles. There will be too much for one donkey to bear. That is one thing. The other thing, obviously, it reminds of other mythological stories from the Greek treasure. This of Ariadne and the labyrinth, where they, in order to get into the labyrinth and find the Minotaur. Remember this story? Then they take a spool of threads, whatever. But he did that, and he gets from Greece to Carthagena, which is Carthage, or Cartagena, Carthago. All these. This is the Carthage in North Africa. In where it used to be in Algeria or Tunisia. Carthage in Tunisia. Medina shekula nashim bikesh la'asot imam milchama. So he finds a kingdom ruled by women, and he wanted to fight with them. אמרו לו, אם תהרוג אותנו, יאמרו נשים הרג. ואם נהרוג אותך, יאמרו מלך שהרגו נשים. So they negotiated with him. They said, it's not worth it for you to fight with us. Because if you win, they will say you won a war against women. And if you lose, you will go down in history as the king who was conquered by women. So he decided not to fight them. That is also, they have grains here of Greek stories about the Amazons and all that. But the end of the story is interesting. So he said, okay, so since we made peace, let us have a meal together. Bring me some bread. הוציאו לו לחם של זהב ותפוחים ורימונים של זהב על שולחן של זהב. So they brought out a golden table with golden bread and golden apples and pomegranates. All the food is made of gold. אמר להם, וכי אוכלים זהב במדינתכם? So he says, how can anyone eat that? You cannot eat gold. אמרו לו, אם לחם היית מבקש, לא היה לך לחם במקומך, שעמדת ובאת לכאן? says, if what you needed was bread, you didn't have enough bread where you live, that you had to come all the way here to wage war against us. And so when he left, he says, I, Alexander the Great, was a foolish king until I came to the city of Carthage and learned wisdom from women. So the message of the story, again, there's the idea of bread and fruits made of gold. Reminds of another famous Greek story, King Midas, which in America sells spare parts, I think, or something like mufflers. For King Midas, he comes back to life. It's like, okay, I can buy a gold muffler, right? But the famous story about he wanted to be rich. He wanted to have the golden touch, that everything that he will touch will turn into gold. And then, it starts in his room. Everything turns to gold. It's beautiful. But then when he goes to eat, everything turns to gold, and he can't eat. It's the curse of wealth. And the idea here is that what the women of Carthage are telling Alexander is, why do you have to keep spreading your kingdom and conquer more and more lands? What is your purpose? If it's for food, for the basic survival, you have it where you are. This is an essential question of why people wage wars against each other. To what purpose? And the purpose of aggrandize themselves, accumulate wealth, strength, power. What is it? So this is one story. The next story is Alexander comes to a country. This is it's hard to identify the name. It's like a fictitious name, Katsia. And the king shows him a lot of silver and gold. Maybe it happened after the previous story, so now he's impervious to gold. He's not interested in that. He says, "No, I didn't come to see your treasures. I want to see how you run the country. I want to see your judicial system." So while they were talking, two people came to present their dispute in front of the king, and that was the argument. Amar Echad, Adoni HaMelech, חורבה לקחתי מאדם זה וגרפתיה, ונמצא מטמון בתוכה. So he said, I bought a house that was dilapidated. It was in shambles, and when I demolished the house to build a new house, I found underneath the house a treasure. And so what is the argument now, you assume?
Do I own?
I want to keep the treasure, right? And the landlord says, the seller says, we would have thought that it's his and he wants it back. But that's what happened. The man says, Amarti lo tol matamon shelcha, hurba lakahti, matamon lo lakahti. It's the opposite. He says, I didn't buy the treasure. I bought the house. I paid you for what it's worth. This is not mine. I don't want to keep something that's not mine. And the other one says, says, why don't you want to keep it? Because you're afraid that you'll be a robber, that you're stealing something that's not yours. I'm the same thing. I don't want to have it. He says, I sold you the plot with everything on it. Whatever, you go all the way down to the bottom of the earth or all the way up to heaven. It's all yours. So the king says to one of them, he says, do you have a son, eligible son? He says, yes. Do you have an eligible daughter? He says, yes. Amar lehem yilchu v'yinas'u l'zeh l'zeh v'yeh matmon l'shneim. He says, yeah, we solved the problem. Let them marry each other. Hopefully they loved each other. But we're talking about a period where arranged marriage was all the rage. So it's not surprising. But he says, just marry them off to each other. And this way, both of them are legal owners of the... he goes a little deeper. He could have said, sell it and split the value of it. But he says that to make it an integral part of the ownership, let them marry each other, and then they both have a claim to it, and they are the owners. So Alexander the Great sits there, and he looks a little perplexed. Amar lo ma ata tamea v'chilo yafe danti. Amar lo hen. He says, don't you like my verdict? He says, yes, it's nice. This doesn't have the intonation here, but I assume that he saws that he's not so happy. Amar lo, ilu ba lefanecha din ze b'mdinatchem, me hayita oseh bo. But if you had a similar case in your country, what would you have done? Amar lo, הייתי חותך ראשו של זה וראשו של זה והמטמון ירד לבית המלך. So obviously, I would, right? I would execute both of them and take the money. Amar lo, so the king answered, now he says, V'hama me'ira lachem. He says, do you have sun? The sun shines in your country? He says, yes. Is rain coming down? Do you have rain? He says, yes. It says, Yesh b'medinatchem be'ema daka. Do you have animals like sheep and cattle in your country? Amar lo hen. Amar lo tipah ruho shel oto ha'ish. B'zchut be'ema daka hama me'ira lachem v'agshemim yordim alechem. He says, you should know, he curses him, the king curses Alexander. He says, you should know that if the reason you have rain and sunshine in your country is not because of humans, it's because of the animals. Because you as humans don't deserve it. It's a very strong criticism. Obviously, it never happened. It was not delivered to Alexander to his face. But this is the kind of the criticisms the rabbis were leveling at him, of saying that, like, at the end of the day, what was the benefit for the world from the conquerors of the Greek Empire? Think about it. Every empire that sought to expand its territories and to claim that it's for the greater good ended up harming people. Whether it was the Greek Empire, the Roman, the Persian, the Spanish, the British, all of them. That's right. So the rabbis say eventually the goal is to make the world a better place, to maintain the natural order. And if people come with this kind of honesty, then you want to help them, support them, and not bring it into the king's treasury. What else do you need? Even today, in some countries where monarchy is still a thing, like the British Empire. I think I mentioned, like, when I visit London and they show me like the city of London and the tower and all that, they're so excited about the monuments there. See, who owns all that, right? The royal family. Who did they take it from? How did they amass all this fortune? Give it back to the people. And they said, no, it brings money to the British economy, because a lot of tourists come in to see them. I said, okay, if it's all about tourism, it's nothing more than an amusement park. So you need actors. You don't need a real king and queen or prince, whatever. Let them have it. But okay, if they're happy with that, and the British Empire never damaged anyone, right? Except for the Middle East and in Africa and the Far East, and who knows what else. So it's good. So finally, the one story here that I think this is much more symbolic. So he goes back, travels back to Greece, and he sits by a spring and he eats bread. So now he's really, down to the basics. He had cured fish, sort of like beef jerky, but fish jerky. So it was ready to eat. You could travel with it for a long time, but in order to eat it, you have to wash the salt away. So he washed it with the water, and they came back with an amazing fragrance. Amar mashma' ma'ayan zeh migan eden ba. He says this must come from paradise, from heaven. So he washed his face, and then he started following the stream, trying to find its source. Very reminiscent of the way the people were looking for the sources of the Nile. Famous quest of Dr. Livingston and explorers in the previous century. So finally he goes all the way back and he finds the source of the Nile. So he gets to the door of Gan Eden, right? That's where they knock. They wrote the song "Knock, Knock, Knocking on Heaven's Doors." So he knocks on the doors and he says, "Open the door for me." Amrulo. So what is the answer? Is that Sha'ar Ladonai? Tzadikim Yavobo. Access denied. Only righteous people could come in, right? Amar lehem afanim elechani hashuv ani tnuli davar. So he's begging from behind the gates. I'm a king. I'm an important person. Give me something. Give me something that I could say. I visited, paradise, and all I got was this, right? So it's like a memento to show that I was here. Natnulu gulgolet ahad. So from behind the wall, they throw at him a skull, גולגולת. כשחזר למקומו, שקל כנגדה כל כסף וזהב שבידו ולא הכריעו. So he went back to where he was, and he takes the skull and he puts it on the scale, try to weigh how much it's worth, and he says all the silver and gold that he put on the other scale couldn't bring it down. It was still heavier than them. He asked the sages, "What is this? How is it happening?" He said, "This is the eyes of a human being. The skull represents the eyes of the human being that are never satisfied." Amar lehem u'minayin, how do you know this is the case? Amru lo, tol kometz afar v'chaseu. He said, take a little dust, a little dirt, and spread it over the eye holes and see what happens. Asa kach u'miyad dichriya. The moment they did that, the skull went down and all the other things went up. So the symbolism of this story is, here's the king, the great conqueror, the emperor, right? Which by the way died at a very young age. He died 33, right? He started his campaign in 322, and in 10 years he before the Common Era, about 10 years he conquered most of Europe, the Middle East, and went all the way to India, and then he died of a disease. So he's the king, he's the emperor, like this is so powerful, but he's denied entrance to Gan Eden. Why? Because he's not a righteous man. So at the end of the day, what really matters is how you affected this world. He asks for something, in return they give him a skull. Also symbolic of all the people that he killed. So this is what you did. He gets a skull, he goes back, and he tries to assess how much it's worth. And they tell him, again, here's the message, that as much as you amass power, prowess, treasures, kill people, all this counts to nothing, because at the end we all die. That's the only thing that makes us, sort of like makes us satisfied. Because what?
Calm.
Right. This is the common fate of all human beings. So the message that I think Haim wanted to deliver here is, and it works with another statement they made. They said, "En osim nefashot latzadikim." For the righteous people, you don't have to build monuments. Nefesh was the word for monument, the mausoleum on the grave at the time of the Gemara. So you don't have to build a monument, because ma'asehem hem zichronah, because it's the deeds and the teachings. And this, I think, this is a message what the Midrash wants to send us at the end of the day, that the way we teach and perpetuate our legacy to others and influence them to do good for the world, this is the real pursuit, and that what lets a person into the Eden.